Hey everybody, Alex Miller at Capneon here, the home of Ghost PAI. I noticed I hadn't gotten anything out to you this week, and I had a revelation at the gym, so you know it must be good. These generative AI models, ChatGPT being the most famous, and maybe the best functioning right now, if the hype is real, this might be approximately the best they ever get. And it's tempting to believe they're going to get better, but I think they are quite likely to get worse. So I'm not saying you won't see better versions over the next year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, but I bet in 10 or 20 years they will have gotten worse, and they will probably stay worse, barring some major event that upsets the order of things. So why is this true? The technology, in a sense, will probably continue to improve, but the social, administrative, and business incentive circumstances around these things probably going to deteriorate. So I'm going to talk about one, model drift. This is a concept in machine learning and my main argument about why this is going to happen. And then also, I invite you to look at your own experiences of big tech companies like Google and Facebook. A lot of people, myself in particular, feel like the information you get from these sources has deteriorated and people are on balance getting worse information and suffering for it. And I think a similar dynamic is almost certainly going to come for things like ChatGPT, and it's going to be even worse. First, model drift. Model drift is this idea we wanted to build a model. We could call it an artificial intelligence model. It could be fancy or less fancy. We do a good job and it works for some purpose. It gives the right answers. Down the road, the world that model is supposed to describe has changed, and we should give it some new data on the new world. And maybe after we do this over a period of years, multiple times, we screw it up a few times. And it's subtle, but particularly important, I think, that the people coming by later are going to have imperfect access to the insights of the people who built it. They're going to be in very different administrative and business circumstances. And it's pretty easy for these things to deteriorate over time. And probably paradoxically, part of the story is that once somebody's using this thing and it's out there in the world, someone's getting paid for it, it's doing work for somebody, it's going to be hard to hit an alarm and say, this thing is starting to work incorrectly. We need to take it offline and fix it. In the case of ChatGPT, one thing I think is amazing about it, and I've made some videos, I would say tempering expectations, if you think that's fair. It'll answer questions around a really huge variety of topics, but this takes one right into the danger where they scrape the whole web to be able to do this, and that's really the only way you're going to do it. ChatGPT does give quite a few sketchy wrong answers, and a big part of the story is just that it got a wrong answer someplace on the web. It's important to emphasize at this point that these models, in a sense, don't understand what they're telling you. They are a good writer that's essentially playing the Google something for you game in a way. They can give you good directions on how to build a house. If they suddenly had a body, they couldn't fill in all the details about how to use that body and build the house. They couldn't adapt if there were problems in the directions, even problems very obvious to us, like maybe you have to go up on a ladder and that's not listed in the directions. If ChatGPT didn't have a source to say to go up on the ladder, it's not going to tell you to do that. So ChatGPT was trained on the world created by Facebook and Google, all these websites out there. It's only as smart as its source material. If the hype is real and ChatGPT replaces Google, we will be in a new world. And after a while, people will start to try to train these things based on the output of other similar large language models, even if they don't know it, because whatever their source is, maybe got lazy and used ChatGPT to generate that source. It becomes a closed loop where ChatGPT is, pardon my French, eating its own shit to survive. When that comes to pass, it's not going to give you true answers, but whatever answers were the most tantalizing to people and got reproduced the most. And this is exactly the story with misinformation traveling through Facebook. what is true is rarely as cool as some insane falsification that was designed to be exciting. And this leads me to my second bullet point, which I'll just spend time on. We actually already have a similar system now with a kind of dumber AI and more people in the loop. And we've kind of already seen it go wrong, where there's all this misinformation flying around and it's going kind of in a closed loop and kind of eating our own shit. And the large language model version of this is going to be a tighter loop that's going to be harder to supervise and moves faster and faster. And it's probably going to be a nightmare version of what a lot of people think is a nightmare now. So to recap, ChatGPT works well because its corpus of information is relatively good. It will probably start to damage that corpus of information by being too successful over time. Closing thought, there's a line of propaganda I see in the data world on LinkedIn I think is kind of telling the same story in different language. Your model is really only as good as the data you put into it. And you hear about this in the investing world. Well, we have this data asset. That's why you should invest in us. We're really the one that can build this fancy AI model. Or we have this big data tool. That's another place you hear it. You can use more data at once and get a better model. And this is good propaganda. Having a cool new algorithm is not great if you don't have appropriate data to feed it. And the problem with megawatt famous stuff like ChatGPT becoming pervasive is that it will start to contaminate the data that is used to train it, and things will get weird.